Hello and welcome to this CNBC Africa special on the road to the World Economic Forum on the 3rd to the 5th of month of May in Durban, South Africa. My name is Bonney, Tunya. We would like to spend the next few moments to explore the theme of It's Time for Impact, basing obviously on the fact that we've had a lot of conversations about solving Africa's problems. Then it is time for impact. We'll spend the next few moments to look at what are the best practices from some of the leading corporate players in this region in terms of solving Africa's problems. Well, very quickly, let me introduce you to my panel. People who will be helping me unwrap this. First off, I'd like to introduce Dr. Susan Mboya, who is the president of the Coca-Cola Africa Foundation and the group director at the Eurasia Africa Women's Economic Empowerment. Also, Vishal Agarwal, who's the managing director, development and investments at General Electric. Welcome to the program. Gentlemen and lady, I'd like us to just kick off with this theme. We've both participated in WEF conversations before. Susan, time for impact, what does that conjure to you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bonnie, for having us here today. I couldn't agree more. It is time for impact. You know, at WEF, I think one of the things WEF has done very well is raise very pertinent questions. And challenge us in the private sector, the public sector, to do something about them. And it's now time to take whatever it is that we've been doing and scale it. You know, we need to scale in order to achieve impact. I think for us in the private sector, it means we need to convene, work together to achieve that scale. And probably we need to reach out to partners who can help us. You know, the public sector. You know, if we want to achieve scale, you know, government needs to be involved, and also the NGOs, the non-profits, who are very close to the communities that we want to serve. Right,
Vishal, we've had these conversations before. We've met at different WEFs, but time for impact, is this the theme that finally works for you?
Well, it resonates with me deeply because, you know, the amount of investment that we've made in localization, in trying to get key decision making in the region, in training our people, in providing quality and services that are no longer second to anything else, is really something that we should all, as private sector, be increasingly proud of. Now, we need to deliver the next generation of outcomes. We need to generate the next generation of shareholder value. And we need to drive outcomes that truly define the region's potential. Not just putting points on the board is enough today, but driving large outcomes to your theme of scalability is really important today. And that's why it resonates with me.
Right. Let's kick off with just looking at a few, the departure point. Kenya, as obviously the anchor economy for East Africa, we have our opportunities, but we also have our challenges. So let's base our conversations around this for a moment. The conversation about youth unemployment is an ending, and we've looked at different ways of solving this. We've wondered whether indeed this is a demographic dividend or a demographic explosion, as it were. But Susan, let's just address that from where you sit from the Coca-Cola Foundation. You've worked in various other initiatives at empowering youth and women. How do we tackle the whole issue of joblessness amongst the youth? As we say, it's time to act, it's time for impact. Where do we start?
Well, you know, from Coca-Cola's standpoint, we've already started. I think we've been asking ourselves hard questions. We call ourselves a youth-oriented brand. What are we doing about this issue? And I think seeing what has happened in some of the countries in Africa where you have you know, very frustrated youth who can't get jobs, and when that explodes, it can, you know, really hurt an economy. So in 2015, we launched the YES program, the Youth Empowered for Success program, and one of the key question we asked ourselves is, how do we create an initiative that ends in a job? Right. 30% of youth empowered, only 30% of youth empowerment initiatives actually work. We tend to be very focused on the training piece, and then that's it. So we set that challenge for ourselves. And we've been running the program with 3 key components. One is convening youth, bringing them together and providing them with the soft skills, right. But also allowing them to talk about what their aspirations and linking them to people who can help them. Right. The second piece is actually the job linkages. And there we've been very pleasantly surprised to find that the private sector actually does have a solution. That is our value chains. We have right. huge value chains. And when we can integrate youth into our value chains, that really does provide a solution at scale. And the third is really around providing an enabling environment and scaling. We're at that point now. I think we've worked on a number of initiatives, a number of solutions. I think we have things that work. And next phase, the next 10 years, is really going to be about scale, bringing private sector partners around the table, bringing government around the table, and taking this and scaling it across the continent.
Let me just push back a bit. You've talked about the private sector as playing a role in this. How is the question of employability to your initiatives or to corporates that play within your space? Do we have employable youth, and why are we not meeting this huge demand as far as unemployment goes?
Well, we're not. I don't think we're not meeting the demand because the youth are unemployable. I think we're not meeting the demand because our businesses don't have the space right. Or the capacity to absorb the huge numbers that are coming out. But that's where I said the value chains are key. One of the things we found in this program is probably 85% of youth were not looking for a job per se, right. and in fact said, I don't want to work for anybody. I want to work for myself. And so private sector driven entrepreneurship is where we've sort of ended up. And in the short time that we've been doing this, we've been able to create 11,000, little over 11,000 jobs. So it is something that we can actually do. Coca-Cola, big part of our value chain is retail. The small shops that you see everywhere, right. the ubiquitous kiosks you right. see everywhere. That's a form of employment. So if we can train youth, bring them into our value chain, and help them to start their own small businesses. Coca-Cola is just an example. There are, almost, every value chain has. Or every company mm-hmm. Through their value chain has opportunities to do this. So it's not just about employing in the formal sense. Right. It's also about creating opportunities for youth.
Let me just bring in Vishal in this. Vishal, does that whole huge youth population that we're trying to reap dividend of offer an investment case from where you see it as GE?
Sure, and let me give you some examples. We have something that we're very proud of called the Financial Management Program, which is the Financial Management Program and our corporate audit staff, really form the backbone of the pedigree of the finance community that drives General Electric, right? And form leadership for the company around the world. And over the last 5 years, we've had 70 financial management graduates from our program mm-hmm. that are now placed in the next generation of our corporate audit staff that are working all around the world, not just in Africa. So these are folks that came in from universities across about 9 African markets, and now they are graduates of a program. And when I talk about a program, they've had a rotation in Hong Kong or in Fairfield or in Nigeria, and they're from here, mm-hmm. right? And they now have these opportunities to learn and grow in our company. I was having a conversation with a young Kenyan professional who I've followed for 10 years, who lives in Boston, who's developed really great investment management skills through one of our businesses, who's now ready to come back. And those kind of programs, we've created a new industrial digital program with the Africa Leadership Program in Mauritius. Those kind of programs create the next generation of leaders for our region. So for us, investing at different generations and different demographics is important. It's right. important at the entry level, but it's important mid-career. It's important at the artisan skill level. It's at various different levels. And we take the leadership journey very seriously. So we're continuously investing in leadership talent for the region.
Obviously, it's great to see that different corporates are lighting small fires, but how then do we scale this up? Because the population is great. I was just looking at statistics that suggest that only 3 million formal jobs are created annually in Africa, in the entire of Africa. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. But how then do we connect initiatives like what Susan is doing and what GE and many other corporates? Is there a structure, a framework where we're able to say this goes here and we're able to have a bigger impact, Susan?
I think absolutely there is, and it's a critical element to these programs. As I said, if I use our youth empowerment program, we've set ourselves a target of 500,000 young people by 2022, and that's obviously going to require us to reach out to other corporates.
Coca-Cola by itself cannot do this.
Coca-Cola by itself can't do it, and frankly, not every young person wants to be working with Coca-Cola. They have very different interests.
They perhaps want to drink your beverages.
They may want to drink our, but I hope they do. But we recognize that this is going to be a joint effort,
right.
And really that's the focus right now, and that is why that is actually a critical plank of our program is around scale. It is around how do we integrate other corporates, how do we integrate government into this, and then how do we create what we're calling an enabling environment, which means making sure that from a young person's standpoint, we're removing as many barriers as we can. The tax, for many young people trying to start these small businesses, just having a premises, having land, so going to talk to county governments, for example, and saying, look, you want to create jobs, give this land to allow this program or that program to happen.
Are those incentives partners like government want to look at or interested in? For example, you've just mentioned land as an example, but there are obviously other incentives that would be used in terms of just creating that link and that partnership. Are governments willing to listen to you?
From our experience, yes. Everybody's trying to solve this problem, and with governments, a lot of times they say, we don't have the money, but if they have the means and they can contribute in kind, that's a key component. Bonnie, just one thought.
Sure.
One of the things that we've been focused on is we talk a lot about the jobs. A lot of times with jobs, it's creating goods or services to sell, but we don't look at the demand side. Are we creating demand? Are we working with the same population to create demand? So one of the components that we're actually looking at with the program as well is to create a kind of a marketplace where youth can use each other's goods and services.
Right.
So it's not enough to say create these jobs and products that they're going to sell. Who's going to buy them?
But then we don't like our own. I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem.
And we need to do not to quote anybody, but buy Africa. Make Africa.
Because
buy
I would
Africa.
rather buy from Vishal a G branded equipment, machinery.
Wouldn't it be cool that it was actually built in the region? It was serviced in the region.
Do we have that culture of buying our own? Because that then includes everybody in this process.
To me, that is such a key component of what needs to happen. We're a huge market, Africa. But everything we do, we're saying, how am I going to export this? How am I going to find a market for it? Well, look around you.
You just preempted something that I wanted to bring in, and Vishal, you can pick this conversation on inclusivity. You've just mentioned, yes, we would want to create not just the services or the goods, but the demand thereof. But then, how do we bring everybody on board? How do we move together as a unit?
So perhaps a little bit by connecting the dots, right? Both for both these discussions, which is one to kind of say, how do you build scale? And then how do you include? So perhaps by showcasing that, look, by driving shareholder value for the private sector, right? By creating scale.
It's always about the bottom line, right?
Well, no, but
it helps.
Someone has to pay the salary,
right?
And the shareholders, keep us employed. So if you think about the need to drive shareholder value, the fact that we can actually today develop scale, that we can make an impact, right, drives more jobs, right? Drives the reason for us to invest more in people, as we would like. Drives the ability for us to generate the next generation of customers and suppliers. And therefore we can make investments in manufacturing. So all of those dots must connect, and being able to show that connected dot puzzle, if you will, to use that analogy, to governments and say, look, if we are able to do this with some enabling environment, this is what you get.
Can I just build on that with one of our programs? It's called Project Nurture. Coca-Cola right now sources our raw materials internationally, so sugar, fruit, etc. And we said, why would I go and get passion fruit concentrate from, somewhere in South America, and we can actually do this here. So we created a program called Project Nurture to train mango and passion fruit farmers on how to grow on the continent, in Kenya and Uganda actually, on how to grow their product and deliver something that is at the level that we can actually incorporate into our products. We also created specific products. In our Minute Maid juice, we created a mango and a passion fruit flavor. So we created not just worked with farmers to create the supply, but also the demand. And I think as corporates, we need to think out of the box, about how to do this. This created jobs for 55,000 farmers. But this is also, we also sold a lot of Minute Maid, and that's what makes it sustainable. So this is not about, just the bottom line. It's when this is driving the bottom line, then it's a virtuous cycle, and it can go on indefinitely.
Because this inclusivity conversation, the quality of growth, isn't ending. We were just looking at data earlier today, where Ethiopia was a major exporter of beef, and they still have a hunger problem in the country. You looked at countries like Rwanda, Ethiopia again, impressive GDP numbers, but we have huge challenges in terms of hunger. We shouldn't be talking about hunger in Africa in this day and age. Are there structures that are there, whether government initiated or otherwise, that would ensure that whatever little growth we are experiencing covers a lot more ground?
Right. Okay. I think with that, creating some sort of close partnership with government is really critical, and we talk about it a lot, right? So it's not that the policy is not there. It's not that the institutions don't exist. It's not that legislative framework don't exist. All of that stuff is in place. It's about how we play with each other, whether the public sector has the political will, and is the private sector able to innovate every day, invest every day, right? Make decisions in region every day. So for us, themes like hiring locally, partnering locally, empowering locally are really important, and weaving those in from a partnership standpoint with the public sector delivers the outcomes.
I think the public sector can also help in terms of building capacity and capability in government. What we're good at is systems. We're good at systems and processes. And if we can help government to develop and improve some of their own systems and processes, that's another contribution, a key contribution that we can make. We have a program called Project Last Mile, where I think nobody has the network of refrigerators that Coca-Cola. We know refrigerators very, very well. And one
you
of the
need to
things
start making refrigerators.
We did till we sold our appliance business recently.
But one of the things that government struggles with is distribution. What we call the cold supply chain, getting vaccines, for example, to an endpoint in the condition that they're supposed to be in. Why? Because coolers are breaking down everywhere. They don't have the means and the tools to fix them. So we provided them with actual mechanics, people from within our organization who are trained on this to build their own capacity in this level. It's not money, but it's building a skill, and it's building a capability that is going to help government, and comes a lot cheaper than if they had to get a consultant, for example.
Because it appears like those beautiful partnerships are very isolated and far in between, where we have private sector initiating and really painting out a clear picture to government. There's a need here that you can easily play in, and that's the challenge that I do see here, that there's that willingness from private sector, well, some of them, and there's the government, and in some instances it has played out beautifully, in others it hasn't. Is there a way of creating a system that improves this luck, that we have a lot more of these partnerships working beautifully? You just mentioned about private sector giving some sort of direction in terms of policy. How do we play, Vishal, in terms of, is there a role for private sector in improving, advising, or even just giving direction in terms of policy innovation and formulation?
Yeah, I think very much so. So there is some amount of role modeling, there is some amount of best practice sharing, but I think time has gone where preaching resonates. It does not, right? We're not there to preach. We're there to deliver outcomes, show results, partner together, and coach each other. There are many things the private sector can kind of, collaborate with government better, and there are many things government can learn perhaps from a best practice standpoint from the private sector. Right. So just building a closer relationship. Often in those PPP letters, the word partnership is forgotten. Right? Everyone talks about public and private. Yeah. The word partnership is forgotten. And the true investment in that partnership really delivers value. So for instance, if you actually look at something that happened recently in Kenya, very sad, but the RVR concession, the Rift Valley Railway concession, that sort of went live in 2007, just got terminated, right? Now, that's a broken partnership, right? It struggled for a long time. Was there will? Perhaps there'll be a post-mortem and people will say, was there will? Was there unnecessary expectation? Was the risk paradigm on the private sector too burdensome? Did the private sector actually deliver to the promises that it made at the outset of the journey? Those are the kinds of questions that one must kind of better in the future. Right? And
the thing is, whenever we talk about PPPs, everybody gets in that conversation thinking, has the private sector gotten a good deal? And every time it doesn't work, RVR and many others, we always look back and said, maybe the private sector never got a good deal, and probably that's the problem. We're getting into this with wrong expectations.
When you say, I'm not sure that everyone in the private sector comes looking for a good deal.
Because everybody says,
we look for an optimal deal.
A win-win. And if there is a deal at all, it's really more around making this sustainable. I think one of the days of private sector writing a check and walking away, we've realized that there's no lasting impact when you do that. The lasting impact comes when you build something into your systems, or you build it in a way that there's a benefit for everyone, and there's incentive for everyone to keep doing whatever it is.
Right.
A quick example, in one of the programs that we were doing, working with a donor organization, and it consisted of, they were training youth and women, and then they were providing them with a stipend to enable them to start a business.
Right.
What we did was we then connected them to our bottlers, our local bottlers in the bottling system, to help them then to start the business. So program ended, and typically when a program ends, the implementing partner, we all pack our bags, we go home.
Right. And we write a good report.
And we write a fantastic report, and we publish it. So I get a call maybe almost a year later from the partner that we had been working with, and they said, we'd like to talk to you about expanding this program. So when I went in, they said, we had planned to just end this, but they said after the program ended, because you talked about the reports, they said the reports kept coming, and we couldn't understand. The program ended. Why? How are these youth groups still reporting? Well, they were continuing to save, go to the bottler, start their business. So this was a truly sustainable initiative. And for me, that's why the deal has to be there. Our bottlers benefit from this. Maybe not as much as they typically would on the open market, but enough that it makes sense for them to continue to do this. And who doesn't want to help youth in their community?
All right. We have just under 6 minutes of this conversation. Vishal, I'd like you to address a very specific issue before we go into our closing comments, and that is the scourge of corruption. And every time we talk about leadership, we talk about these partnerships and growth in Africa, the corruption story always comes up, with different people offering different solutions. My specific question would be, is there a role for business in dismantling this whole ecosystem? Is there a specific role that business leaders can play in addressing the whole corruption story?
Sure, and I think there's some great examples locally. I think what Safaricom CEO Bob Collymore has done with Joshua from KCB, going out and playing a big role. A lot of us kind of joined that campaign in terms of both transparency and
feel free to declare your wealth on this show. By the way.
a call for both transparency, but also taking responsibility as private sector, right? To sort of say, look, there is a big part of the give and take. People are not just taking without the giving, and there must be responsibility here. And let's not play the blame game, but let's kind of put in the process and the systems and the accountability on whatever side we control, right? So for private sector to do that, put their hand up and say, look, I take responsibility. I'm going to make sure that the values that I share with my staff, the vision, the role modeling in the community is to the look and feel that I want back. Right? I think that's what we can do and do more of, right? It's not just about passing a bill or writing a piece of legislation. It's about the real actions in the marketplace. And I think that we must do a lot more of that. We must do it with our young ones as they come into our business, share with them the value system and the merits of it. Right. Not in a, again, preaching way, but just like we do with young ones at home, that you role model for them, you show them the value of it, you show what it means for the community and what it means for their own lifestyle. And that's the type of visionary stuff that as private sector leaders we must do every day.
Fantastic. I'd like both of you to give us your closing comments, and very specifically from where you see it from the foundation and the experiences that you've had in your organizations. What would you recommend as possible low-hanging fruits in terms of accessing inclusivity in growth, as well as just having that impact for growth? I'll start with Susan and then Vishal.
Well, like I said, I think we've talked a lot about PPPs. We talk at Coke about this golden triangle of government, private sector, and NGOs. I think the key lies with that, and you sort of alluded earlier. Everybody's going off and doing these small things. Right. How do you bring them together? If there's one thing I would like to come out of WEF with, it's an agreement on that. It's we're all there. All the key players are there. Mm-hmm. It's to move past each of us working in our own little silos, right. And saying, how do we integrate all this work, because each of us has a role to play. And if we can do that, I think we can crack a lot of this scourges that we face.
Right, Vishal?
Look, Bonney, I'm asked that question often in the context of what advice would you give a peer looking in to invest in Africa? What advice would you give a peer that's looking to expand into Africa? And I think for me it's clear: hire locally, empower locally, partner locally, and then trust them. Let them do their job, right? Let them truly live that value. Move the decision making to the region. Let's grow our leaders in region, right? And show that they can truly scale it, because who actually knows markets in Kenya, Ghana, Angola better than our people, our locally grown leaders, right? And it's not to say that they can't leverage talent from elsewhere. They must and they should, but decision making must now reside in region.
Fantastic. We'll have to leave it there. It's been a fantastic half hour just looking at the whole question of inclusivity for growth, even as we build on the theme for this year's World Economic Forum for Africa on its time for impact. In the past half hour, I've been speaking to Dr. Susan Mboya Kidero, who's the president of the Coca-Cola Africa Foundation and the group director for Eurasia for Africa Women's Economic Empowerment. Also, I've had Vishal Agarwal, who's the managing director, development and investments at General Electric. Like we said, these are conversations that build up to the whole question of, yes, it's time for Africa to impact. How else do we start this? And I hope to see you on the 3rd to 5th in Durban, South Africa for the World Economic Forum.